If you are new to Commander, this is going to be the video for you. I'm going to go over each card in the deck and give you an explanation of what you need to know before you start playing and how to play these decks. So here's what you need to start playing the game. You really just need to buy the deck, but I recommend a deck box and card sleeves, which I've already sleeved up the deck. And this is the deck box. It's really simple. This is from Gamegenic. I'll have all the links to these in the description down below. This cost me around $5. The deck cost me around $27. You can find it on Amazon for around $20. And the card sleeves from Spectrum. This is the Iridan card sleeves. I'm not sure on the price on them because they were gifted to me to try out and test. But typically card sleeves are going to cost you anywhere from $10 to $12. So again, I recommend a deck box, card sleeves, and the deck to get started. So it comes with these instructions. So this is the paper that comes with the deck. This is how to get started playing Magic, or just the quick rules of it. Everyone starts at 40 life. I recommend you use dice to show what life total you're at. For example, I use 2 D10s, so you could use a 4 and a 0 to show what your life total is. So everyone starts out at 40. Your commander starts in the command zone, and I usually keep that in the top left or right corner depending on where I'm at within the 4-player on the table. Whenever you try to cast your commander more than the first time, you have to pay an additional 2 mana to cast it. And if your commander would be put into your hand or your library from anywhere, you can choose to put it back into the command zone. If your commander would be put into a graveyard or exile, it goes there as normal, and the next time state-based actions are performed, your commander is still in that zone. You can choose to put it in the command zone. If your commander is dealing 21 or more combat damage to any player throughout the game, that player loses. And those are the basic rules that this comes with for this deck. So with Token Triumph, our commander is Emmara, Soul of the Accord. And I know that because the name of the card is always going to be at the top. And then if you can cast it, it's going to be at the top right here. So to cast Emmara, Soul of the Accord, I have to pay a green and a white to do so. Power and Toughness is at the bottom right if it is a creature, which is 2/2, so it has 2 power and 2 toughness. And the type of card over here, it is a legendary creature, which our commander has to be a legendary creature unless it says otherwise. And this is an elf cleric. If it's relevant, there'll be cards that say an elf can do this, a cleric can do this. And moving on to the text of the card, it says, whenever Emmara, Soul of the Accord becomes tapped, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. And then below that is flavor text. Flavor text is always italicized, and it says, whatever hatred destroys, a single act of trust can revive. Flavor text is giving you a bit of the story, or giving you an idea of what Emmara said, so that would be in the quotes. Or if someone else said that, there would be another name there. So flavor text does not affect the card whatsoever. Alright, let's talk about the rest of the cards. This is a Planeswalker card. We know that because it says Legendary Planeswalker right here, and then it has the type, which is Ajani. And then it will have different modes here that say plus or minus. Some might say all plus or even 0, but for example, Ajani, Caller of the Pride is the name. It costs 1 white, and when it comes in, it will start with 4, and if we add 1, it will become 5. If we subtract 3 from the 4, it will become 1, and the last part, the -8, that is most of the time referred to as an ultimate, and we can only do that if we have 8 or more counters on this card. So let me give you a little bit of an idea of how to cast something. You have to use lands, and we know this is a land because it says basic land, and then it says what type here. In this deck, it's going to be white and green, so you're going to see plains and forest in this deck. You'll also have cards that are colorless. When you tap them, they'll tap for colorless, which is that diamond there. And you can also do other things with this card when you pay 2 green and a white. And then you tap it, and then you get the results of that. There's also ways to tap for a white or a green, but the downside would be, oh, this enters the battlefield tapped, and I'll explain that whenever we're playing the game, and it comes with all of those. There's also instants. Instants and sorceries are different from each other because sorceries have to be on your turn. Instants can be on your turn or your opponent's, and we'll just leave it at that for now. Enchantments. So if it's an enchantment aura, it has to be attached to something. It could be a creature, it might be to a land, a player. It will let you know what it needs to be. If it just says enchantment, it's just something that goes on your playmat or what they call the battlefield. There's also creatures, and so we know it's a creature because it has the power and toughness, and that will tell us what they are. Creatures can be destroyed, and they can also be buffed, which is, instead of this being a 1-2, maybe it becomes a 2-3. So if it gets a +1/+1, it would have a higher power and toughness. And there's all sorts of creatures, and again, they tell you if you want to play this card, you have to have at least a total of 3 mana, but one of them has to be white, one of them has to be green, and the last one can be colorless or whatever color. So they tell us what is necessary for that payment. And last, a brief overview, we'll talk about artifacts. If you notice at the top, they don't have a color, which makes them more versatile. So for example, with Talisman of Unity, we only have to pay 2 mana to get all of this. An artifact stays on the playmat. With instants and sorceries, they do not stay on the playmat, they go to what is referred to as the graveyard. So back to Talisman of Unity, this is an artifact. And with artifacts, they're going to be colorless, so that gives us more of a opportunity to be able to play them. So 2 of whatever color or colorless mana is going to be needed to play this. Sol Ring is going to be probably the most popular card you're going to see among this format. You can pay 1 to get 2, which is really good, and you'll see in most scenarios you have to pay 3 to get 1 or pay 2 to get 1. So long story short, it's a good rate. Paying 1 to get 2 instead of putting 3 in to get 1 or 2 to get 1 is really good. So we'll talk about that if we play it. So now I'm going to shuffle up this deck, and I'm going to talk about the tokens that come in the deck. They are not shuffled in the deck, they are put to the side to represent something. You know they're tokens because it has token creature, or it'll say token referring to whatever the card is. These are double-sided in this deck, and tokens represent something. They can be destroyed unless it says it's an emblem, then those cannot be destroyed. So let's shuffle up this deck, and I'll give you a brief overview of how to play Token Triumph. So some of you may not know how to shuffle, and what I recommend is to sleeve up your deck, which is to use card sleeves. That way they protect the cards when you're shuffling. So normal people, when they're playing a card game, they will shuffle what's called a bridge shuffle. They'll do the 2 sides together. You don't really want to do that in this game. I prefer taking however many cards I can hold, break it in half, and then insert it like that, and then I'll let them fall. And I'll do that a couple more times, so I can just grab another stack. I'll insert them about halfway of this side, and then the lower right of these cards, and I want to make sure they're facing all the same way, so the names are at the top. That way when I draw, I'll be drawing the same way. Again, I'll do that slow one more time, and I just relax my grip on both, and then over time you can get faster, and then I push them back together on both. Both hands I'm squeezing very lightly, and that's how I shuffle. I recommend to shuffle 7 to 10 times. I really recommend 10 or more because this is a new deck. You want to have a variety of things that you draw. You don't want to draw all lands or draw everything except lands, because you need lands to play your spells and get further into the game. And I always cut it in half, or you can ask someone to cut you, and so that means if I present this to someone and I say, would you please cut my deck, they'll take it from wherever part of the deck, and then they'll split it in half like this, and that way it helps people not to cheat, or again, you're just giving that variety in your cards. So this is my commander. It will go into the command zone. I have my tokens, but I'm going to put them off the mat. I'll bring them in whenever I need them. So in a normal game, you draw 7 cards. So I drew 6 lands and 1 creature. So what we're going to do is we're going to mulligan. And to mulligan is to put all these back. We're going to shuffle all this again. We can have it cut again, and we'll draw 7, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that time we drew only one land, and we don't want to keep this because we have a lot of green cards and we have one white card. And this is telling us that we need green mana or green lands or lands that produce green mana to be able to play them. So let's put this back again. So normally every time you mulligan, you have to put a card back. So you are at a disadvantage every time you mulligan. But for this example, we will start with 7, no matter how many times I need to shuffle this. Okay, I think this is a really good hand because I actually have lands and cards. So, this is my hand. You do not show your hand in the game, but for this example, I'm going to. So, I have 2 plains, and I have a forest, and I have these 4 cards that I can play. If it is your turn and it's 3 or more players, you get to draw a card. If it's a 2-player game, whoever goes first does not get to draw a card. So for this example, I'm going to assume this is a 3 or more player game. Typically, 4 players is ideal, and that's called a pod. So I'm going to get my 7 cards, and I'm going to draw my card, and this is the first turn, and I drew a forest. So I'm going to play a forest. I can play a plains or a forest, and right now I can only play 1 land each turn. So I'm going to let that be my turn because I cannot play anything because, for example, Scavenging Ooze, that requires 2 mana total and I only have 1 right now. And also, my commander, if I want to cast her, it's a green and a white mana. I can't do that right now. So I'm probably going to play her next turn if I can. So I'm going to pass the turn, and then when it comes back to my turn, I will untap, upkeep, and draw. That is a phrase you want to keep in your mind as much as you can. So what that means is when it was my turn, let's say I did tap my land to play something, but I didn't, but this is just an example. When it is back to my turn, I will untap all of my cards. I will have an upkeep which will say, during your upkeep this happens, or at the beginning of your upkeep this happens. Right now I don't have that. So now I'm going to draw a card for my turn, and it is a land. So I'm going to play a plains, and I'm going to tap both of these to cast Ymara, Soul of the Accord. So she doesn't have any triggers when she enters the battlefield, and triggers is something that says at the beginning or when this or when they enter. So Ymara says whenever Ymara, Soul of the Accord becomes tapped, create a 1/1 soldier creature token with lifelink. And so we have tokens for that when that happens. So the point of the game is to get our opponents to 0 life or find other ways to win the game. So, for example, we all start with 40 life. This is a 2/2, so we could win the game by getting our opponents to 0 life or dealing our opponents 21 commander damage, which probably won't happen in this game, but let's go ahead and keep playing out the deck. So let's go past the turn, comes back to our turn. We're going to untap, upkeep, and then draw. So let's play a land, let's play a forest, and then we are going to play a Scavenging Ooze, so we can pay 1 and a green mana. So we have to at least pay a green mana. Now we can tap either one of these. I'll just tap the plains. So I paid a total of 2 mana for Scavenging Ooze. So Scavenging Ooze is a 2/2, and I can pay a green mana to exile target creature from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze, and I gain 1 life. So that means when that happens, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze, and this will become a 3/3, and it'll become a bigger creature over time when I do that. So I want to make sure in this deck Ymara is becoming tapped. So how I do that is I will say, player number 2, I'm going to attack you with Ymara, or for example, we would say, I'm going to combat. After we've played our spells, played our lands, we can tap Ymara and say, I'm going to attack player number 2, and this says whenever Ymara becomes tapped, this happens. So when we tap her and say we are attacking someone, we get a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. So we are slowly building our board up every time she becomes tapped, and early on in the game, you will probably have to put her in danger because you are going to have to attack into people, but there are other ways to get Emmara tapped, and hopefully we come across those cards. So I think that will be our turn. We can't play anything else. So after combat, there's another phase. This is called the main phase, to play spells and play lands, but we've already played our land for turn, so I think we are just going to pass the turn. When it's our turn again, we're going to untap, upkeep, and then draw. So we drew an Avacyn's Pilgrim. So let's play a Plains. Let's tap a Forest. So when we tap a Forest, we are telling us and other players that we are using the mana that comes from this and spending it. So I'm going to take that green that I tapped with the Forest and spend it on Avacyn's Pilgrim. It just cost 1 green mana, and I can tap Avacyn's Pilgrim to get a white mana. But when we play creatures, they have Summoning Sickness, which means we cannot tap them with that symbol immediately, and we can't attack with them as well. We have to wait till it's our next turn. We have 3 mana. I think we should play Overwhelming Instinct. So for 2 and a green, we get an enchantment, and this says whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, we get to draw a card, which is what we're going to do this turn. So after we've played our spell, we are going to say, I'm going to go to combat, and I'm going to attack player 2 again, and I will tap these 3 cards. And so I have 2 triggers. One is whenever Emmara becomes tapped, so we'll create a soldier. And the second one is when I attack with 3 or more creatures, I get to draw a card. And so remember, a trigger says whenever, when, or at. So this says whenever I attack with 3 or more, I draw a card. So I could attack with 100 creatures, I'm still drawing 1 card with how this is worded. All right, so we drew a Voice of Many, and I think that will be our turn. So after that, when we pass the turn and it comes back to our turn, we get to untap, upkeep, and then we will draw. We drew a Commander's Sphere. We do have a land to play. This is called Temple of Plenty. So normally when you play a land, it would enter untapped unless it says Temple of Plenty enters the battlefield tapped. And it also says when Temple of Plenty enters the battlefield, scry 1. So this does enter tapped, so we can't use it this turn, but we get to scry 1. To scry 1 means we are going to look at the top card. We can choose to keep that, or we can put it on the bottom of our deck, which is called our library. I think I'm going to keep this on the top of my library because this is going to get us to draw even more cards, which is what I want to do. So I'll keep that right there. I'm going to look at our hand here. We could get a lot of basics, which is basic lands with Harvest Season. So for 3 mana, we can search our library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control. Put those cards on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. I think that's really good for our deck, so I'm going to do that. So since none of these have Summoning Sickness, I'm going to attack player 2. I'm going to tap all my creatures, and then I'm going to have 2 triggers, which one is when this becomes tapped, I create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. The second one is I get to draw a card when I have 3 or more creatures attacking. And then I'm going to go to my main phase, which this is called the second main phase. I'm going to play Harvest Season for 3 mana total. I have to pay a green mana and 2 of whatever. So I got that. And I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, X being 5. I'm going to search my library for up to 5 basic lands, where 5 is the number of tapped creatures I control. So you replace that number with X. So I'm going to get 5 basic lands. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And I'll show you how to create a graveyard, which is pretty simple. You have a section next to your library or your deck, and you just let everybody know, hey, this is where my graveyard is. So I'm going to take my deck. I'm going to get 5 basic lands, and I'm just going to grab them here. I think I'm going to grab 2 plains and 3 forests. So I have done that. Now I'm going to shuffle my library. Once that's shuffled, we're going to take these basic lands and we're going to put them on the battlefield tapped, like Harvest Season said. And what's great about getting all these lands on our battlefield is we are that much farther ahead in the game now, and we also have one less land to potentially draw. So it's a win-win right there. Okay, I don't think we can play anything with our one white that we have, so we will pass the turn. We'll go to our next turn. We will untap, upkeep, and draw. So we don't have a land to play, so we won't be doing that. I did want to, I think we'll play Commander's Sphere. I think now would be a good time to play some of these creatures. So let's tap 3 mana. I'll tap 2 forests and a plains. So 3 mana total, can be whatever. I can then tap that to add 1 mana of any color in my commander's color identity, which is white and green. And then I can also sacrifice this, which means it will go to the graveyard and I get to draw a card. I don't think I will do that unless I really need to draw a card. Let's play Idol of Oblivion. We'll tap a plains and a forest. So that says we can tap this artifact and draw a card, but only if we've created a token this turn, which we do a lot. And then we can also pay 8 mana and tap it to sacrifice this, so it'll go to the graveyard, and then we create a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token, which is a really big creature. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana, and I think we are going to play Trostani Discordant. So this says, other creatures you control get +1/+1, which is really great for us, makes our creatures that much bigger. When this enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink, and I think we have one more. So what we're going to do is use some dice to show what we have that's not summoning sick and what can be used to attack our opponents this turn. So I'm going to put this token back. So we have 3 we can attack with and 2 that we just had enter the battlefield with Trostani Discordant. At the beginning of our end step, each player gains control of all creatures they own, which is really good if someone were to try to take any of our creatures. So that would be helpful. And we are going to go to combat, have these move over here. So we can attack with, let's say, Amara and these soldiers. So instead of them being 1/1s, now they're 2/2s with lifelink. And what lifelink means is whenever we deal something combat damage, whether it's a creature or a player, we get to gain that much life. So these are now 2/2s, and 2 times 3 is 6. So if these were to hit a player or a creature, we would gain 6 life. And when Amara becomes tapped, we get to create another soldier, so I'll just put that right there. And whenever we attack with 3 or more creatures, we get to draw a card. So I drew a fortified village, which is a land. I'm going to go to my second main phase. So I will tap Idol of Oblivion, and I get to draw a card because I made 1 token at least this turn, and that is Dawn of Hope. That says whenever I gain life, I can pay 2 mana of whatever, and if I do, I get to draw a card. And then it also has on the bottom of that, I can pay 3 and a white, so 4 mana total, and I create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. So I think we can actually play that this turn. And I don't think we played a land this turn either. So this will enter the battlefield tapped unless we reveal a forest or plains from our hand, which we don't have, and that is completely fine. So that will enter the battlefield tapped. I will pay 2 mana total, tapping Commander's Sphere and Avacyn's Pilgrim, and I'll play Dawn of Hope. So whenever I gain life, I can pay 2 mana and draw a card. So let's pass the turn. It's our turn again. Let's untap, upkeep, and we will draw. We drew an Aura Mutation, which says destroy target enchantment, create X 1/1 green sapperling creature tokens, where X is the enchantment's mana value. So a mana value is at the top right, and it's a total of 3 mana for Overwhelming Instinct. I would typically, or the majority of the time, use Aura Mutation on an opponent's enchantment, but it does give us the option to target any enchantment. So we could destroy Overwhelming Instinct or anything if we wanted to. And then we get that many sapperlings. I don't think we will play that. I think we will try to play a Verdant Force, which is 8 mana total. We have to pay at least 3 green, so let's do that. And I recommend tapping your single colored mana rather than things like Temple of Plenty or Fortified Village, because that way we get options in case we are running low on mana. So that's 6 total. Make it 7 for Avacyn's Pilgrim, and then we can toss in a forest there. So that's 8 mana for Verdant Force, and we have not made a token this turn, so I wouldn't tap Idol of Oblivion just yet. So I do want to show you something interesting. So with Scavenging Ooze, it says we can pay a green mana, so let's do that. And target card from the graveyard gets exiled. And so for this example, let's say our opponent has a creature in their graveyard. So if it is a creature, this gets a +1/+1 counter. So let's do that. And I can just give it a 1 with a die to show that it has an extra +1/+1 counter. And I gain 1 life. And it's Dawn of Hope says, whenever I gain life, I can pay 2 mana, and if I do, I get to draw a card. So let me show you how that works. So I just gained 1 life. I can pay 2 to draw a card, and I would get Scatter the Seeds. Whenever you draw a card, you don't show anyone unless the card says it needs to be revealed. And let's go to combat. We'll swing again with soldiers and our Emmara Soul of the Accord. This all could be 6 soldiers total, but for now I'm just gonna keep it the way it is. So whenever Emmara becomes tapped, we create a soldier token, and whenever we attack with 3 or more creatures, we get to draw a card. We got a Slate of Ancestry, which says we can pay 4, tap this to discard our hand, which means we get rid of all of our cards, they go in our graveyard, and we can draw a card for each creature we control, which would be really good for us. So we're gonna try to do that. It would have to be next turn, but we'll do that. All right, let's go to our main phase, and now we can tap Idol of Oblivion because we've created a token. We'll draw a card, and we got Maja Bredagard Protector. So for 5 mana total, it's 2 green and 2 white. This is a 2/3 legendary creature, human warrior, that says other creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token, which is different than what we're making with Emmara, and I'll show you that real quick. It is looking for this type of token whenever this trigger happens, and we know it's a trigger because it says whenever, so that way whenever we play a land or a land enters the battlefield under our control, this will be created. All right, now let's pass our turn. It's our turn again. We are going to untap. We will go to our upkeep, and I did forget, but Verdant Force, this is a 7/7 creature, and at the beginning of each upkeep, we're going to create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. So that means not only on our upkeep, but each of our opponents, we get a 1/1 green sapperling. Very powerful card right here. We would have 3 of these by the time it's our next turn, assuming we had 3 opponents and they had their upkeep, which they do unless a card says otherwise. So when it's our turn, we are going to make another sapperling token. So we untap, we had our upkeep, and now it's our time to draw a card. We drew a Citywide Bust. So this says destroy all creatures with toughness 4 or greater. And right now, if we did do that, we would destroy these 2 creatures. Why would we play this card if it's going to harm us? Well, hopefully we play it whenever it's needed. So for example, we would play it whenever an opponent is farther ahead than we are. So if we need to reset the board, this is one of those cards that we can use, because we'll be able to keep a majority of our creatures, which will be really helpful. So that's in our hand. I think we want to play a Slate of Ancestry, and I think we'd be able to use it as well. So let's pay 4 mana for Slate of Ancestry. I'm going to tap 2 forests and 2 plains for that to cast it, and I'll have to pay an additional 4 mana. So I'm going to pay 2 forests and 2 plains, so 8 mana total to play it, and then I'm going to pay 4 and tap it and discard my hand. So why can we tap this, but we can't tap our creatures immediately like Avacyn's Pilgrim? We can do that because it's not a creature. We'll tap it, and we're going to draw a card for each creature we control, which is going to be crazy. So let's put all of this in our graveyard, and now we're going to draw 4, 5, 6, 7, 11, 14, 15, 16 cards. That is crazy because we start the game with 7. Having 16 cards is awesome. There is one downside though. So while we have 16 cards in our hand, we have to discard down to 7 at our end step. So let's go over that. So we'll try to play as much as we can and we'll see what we can do. So we got 16 cards. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana to use, and we haven't played a land this turn. So let's play a Plains. Hopefully we can do something with that. Now we have 6 mana. Let's play. So we have a Arcane Signet that's similar to Commander Sphere. It's just 1 mana less. And I think we will do that. Jaspera Sentinel, I think we'll grab that. And Presence of Gond. Okay, those are the ones I want to cast. So let's cast Arcane Signet first. We'll tap Avacyn's Pilgrim and a Plains for Arcane Signet. We will cast a Jaspera Sentinel for 1 green mana. Why I wanted to play this is because we're going to find more ways than just tapping our commander in combat. So this is a 1/2 creature with reach, which means if an opponent were to have a creature with flying, normally we wouldn't be able to block it, but now that we have reach, we're able to block that creature. The next is tap this creature, tap an untapped creature you control. So in a perfect scenario, if we were able to tap this turn, we would be able to tap this and this to get 1 mana. Now, again, we want to have Emmara tapping each turn possible, because when she becomes tapped, whether that's attacking or cards like this, we get to create a 1/1 White Soldier creature token with lifelink. So we played this, we cannot tap it because it has Summoning Sickness. We're also going to tap Presence of Gond, and it's an enchantment aura that says enchant creature. We'll pay 3 mana, and it says the enchanted creature has tap, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. I will put it under the creature to show that it is being enchanted by this enchantment aura, and it will just remind me, hey, this can be tapped to do this. So we've created a token this turn with Verdant Force, so I'm going to tap Idol of Oblivion to draw a card, and it is a land. It is Canopy Vista. This says it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands, which we do. But we have already played a land this turn, so we're going to keep it in our hand. All right, we have 1 mana to spend. I don't think we'll be able to use it, so let's go to combat and see what we can do. So I'm going to gather all these up, and let's go to combat, and we will attack with at least 3 creatures because we want to have Overwhelming Instinct happen. So we'll tap with our soldiers, and we actually won't tap with Emmara just to keep her safe. So we attacked with 3 or more creatures. We will get to draw a card, which is Sentinel Hierophant. So for 4 mana, it's a 3/2, and it says creatures you control can now tap and add a green mana, which is really, really good for this deck. So we drew our card. Now we're going to go to our main phase. We can tap our commander with our new enchantment because she does not have Summoning Sickness. So we could tap this, and we create an Elf Warrior 1/1. And since this is tapped, we create another soldier, and you can see how this can get pretty well out of hand. We also dealt damage with our lifelink creatures, so we would have gained life, and whenever we gain life, we can pay 2 mana, and if we do, we get to draw a card. So let's pass the turn, and we would have 3 upkeeps to go through, so this is going to get really big. So we would go from 4 to 7, and then we're going to go to untap. We're going to go to our upkeep, so we'll create another Saproling. We're going to draw a card, and I did forget to discard down to 7, so let me do that. So when you discard, they have to go to your graveyard. Okay, I have 7 cards, so back to my turn, and I would draw my card. So let's play a land. I'm going to play Canopy Vista because it enters the battlefield untapped because I control 2 or more basics. Let's play Sentinel Hierophant right here. So this says I can pay 4 mana, and now my creatures can have tap, add green mana, which is really, really good because you can have a lot of mana accessible, and my mistake was discarding one of those cards that you could put a lot of mana into, but I'll show you. For example, March of the Multitudes, you can pay a green, a white, and X, so at least 3 mana, and it says convoke. Your creatures can help cast this spell, and each creature you tap while casting this pays for 1 mana, or 1 mana of that creature's color. And we can create X 1/1 soldier creature tokens with lifelink, so we'll create more of these. So if we did have this, we now have a lot of mana because of Sentinel Hierophants. Like, we could tap these 3 for 8 green mana, and this would get out of hand very quickly. So I should have kept that card, but I'm still learning, and that's what's going to happen in this scenario. I'm always learning, and I'm new to this deck, so I'm still going to be learning what cards I should have kept. And every time we learn something, we get that much better. So next time I play this game, or next time I play this deck, I should say, and I have this kind of board state, I'm gonna wanna keep this card if I have Sentinel Hierophants out and a lot of creatures. We played our land for this turn, and I think that will be showing off this deck. I really like this deck. I like finding ways to create tokens just from unique ways of, hey, you need to tap your commander in order to do this. So I hope that gives you a better explanation of how to play this deck. Now we're going to go through the rest of the cards, and I'll show you what they each say and how to use them. So for example, with Sylvan Reclamation, we can exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. So we can get rid of up to 2 artifacts, or up to 2 enchantments, or 1 artifact, or 1 enchantment, or just 1 artifact, or 1 enchantment. So it can give you up to 2 options or down to 1. It also has basic land cycling, so if we don't want to pay the 5 mana to do this effect, we can pay 2 mana. For example, tap 2, discard this, and we can search our library for a basic land, so if we need to play a land, that is an option. There's also Hornet Queen for 7 mana total. We add the 4 plus the mana on the right. So for 7 mana, we get a flying Death Touch creature. It's a 2/2, and when this enters the battlefield, we create 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and Death Touch. When something has flying, it can only be blocked by creatures with flying or with reach. So this can be really powerful with decks that don't have flying creatures or reach. They just can't block these. So, and if they have Death Touch, that means no matter how much damage is dealt to them, they are going to be destroyed, the opposite creature. Let me show you an example of how combat works, because we didn't really go over that. So let's say I have a Sentinel Hierophants and a Verdant Force. If I attack my opponent and they have a Verdant Force, they can block Sentinel Hierophants and only my creature would die, because it is dealing 3 to their 7 toughness. And so for combat, or for that turn, they would be at 7 power and 4 toughness, so you could find ways to deal 4 damage to them somehow. When you attack an opponent, you can't choose, oh, I'm attacking this creature. You have to say, player 2, I am attacking you with Sentinel Hierophants. And they could choose to block or not, depending on what their game plan is. But for this example, I would block a 3/4 with my 7/7, because why take 7 damage whenever I could destroy their creature? Because 2 minus 7 is -5, and so whenever a toughness equals 0, it's going to go to the graveyard. So that would be that scenario. So let's give another example. What if we have a 1/1 attacking a 1/1? So, okay, player 2, I'm going to swing at you, or I'm going to attack you with a 1/1. If they block with a 1/1, both of these creatures are going to go to the graveyard. If I had a 2/2, and if I was swinging at an opponent and they had a 2/2, they could block my creature, and this would go to the graveyard because 2 is greater than 1. Let's talk about if I have a 7/7 attacking a creature with Death Touch. Let's say I attack with a 7/7 and they block with Hornet Queen against my Verdant Force. Verdant Force is going to go to the graveyard because of Death Touch. So no matter how much damage is dealt to Verdant Force, it's going to go to the graveyard because of Death Touch. So that can be really powerful. And also the tokens this creates, it creates 4 other creatures with flying and Death Touch. So that can give a lot of defense for that player. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So that's a little bit into how combat works. Let's talk about the rest of these cards. We have Nissa's Expedition. For 5 mana total, we can Convoke, which we talked about earlier. We can tap creatures to help pay for the cost of this card. We don't have to pay all mana. And then we get to search our library for up to 2 basic lands and put them on the battlefield tapped, and then we'll shuffle. We also have Farhaven Elf. When this enters the battlefield, we can search our library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then we will shuffle. So when something enters, it's, for example, we pay 3 mana, and we tell everybody, I'm gonna cast Farhaven Elf, and assuming it doesn't get countered, or something, assuming everything goes right, it will enter the battlefield, and then we get to get a basic land from our library, put it on the battlefield tap, and then we will shuffle. And that's how Farhaven Elf works. Let's talk about the rest of the deck. We have Selesnya Guildmage. So with this mana cost, it says we can pay green, white, which means we can pay 1 green, 1 white, 2 green, or 2 white. So it gives us some flexibility there. And then we can pay 4 mana, which is 3 and a green, to create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token, or we can pay 3 and a white, so another 4 mana, to have all of our creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. And this is different from counters because it says until end of turn, so we don't add counters to our creatures. It's just something we have to remember. So they're big for that 1 turn. So I just took out most of the lands from this stack. This is Talisman of Unity. So we can pay 2 mana and then we can tap it that turn for a colorless mana, or we can get a green or white mana, but it deals 1 damage to us. And initially you may think that's really bad to be dealt 1 damage from trying to get mana, but in the bigger scope of things, it's not a big deal because we have 40 life. It's only a big deal if you have 1 life, so keep that in mind. Next is Jade Mage. This is 2 mana total, but it's 1 and a green. It's a 2/1 creature. We can pay 2 and a green to create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. Next is Felidar Retreat. This is an enchantment for 4 mana, so 3 and a green. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to choose one of these 2 options. The first one is create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, which would be this token right here. Or we could put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, and then they gain vigilance until end of turn. So both of these are really good options. I do want to talk about vigilance. Vigilance is a keyword. It's just like Death Touch, just like Lifelink. It is called a keyword because it means something, like it does something. So vigilance means if we have, let's say, this cat token and we attack, normally we have to tap our creature, and then if we have a tapped creature, we can't block with it. So the cool thing is vigilance makes it where we can attack, but we don't tap our creature. So as long as our creatures aren't tapped, we can block, and so that gives us more defense. It's very helpful. So that's another thing I want to talk about real quick. If we have our opponent's creatures, they're all tapped, and we attack our creatures, and we attack with our creatures at our opponents, they cannot block it because in order to block, you have to have your creature not tapped. That's another important key there. Devouring Light. So for 1 white, this is Convoke, so we can help pay the mana cost. We can exile target attacking or blocking creature. There is Champion of Lambholt. I really like this card. It says creatures with power less than Champion of Lambholt's power can't block creatures you control. So the bigger this gets, the better. And it gets bigger because when another creature enters the battlefield under our control, which we make a lot of creatures, as you just saw, this gets +1/+1 on it, and it's a counter, so it stays on there. So for example, this is a 1/1, and over time it gets, let's say, 4 counters on it. Creatures with power less than 5 can't block creatures you control, which is really, really good. It's gonna make it where we deal a lot of damage and they cannot be blocked. Rishkar Pima Renegade for 3 mana. It's a 2/2. This enters the battlefield we get to put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures, and it makes each of our creatures with a counter on them tap for a green mana. There's Leafkin Druid for 1 and a green. It's a 0/3 creature. It can tap and add 1 green, but if we control 4 or more creatures, we add 2 green instead. Next is Reclamation Sage. When this enters the battlefield, we get to destroy an artifact or an enchantment, which can be very helpful if an opponent has an artifact or an enchantment that is doing a lot of work for them. And we get a creature out of it. I mentioned this Planeswalker before. This is the only Planeswalker in the deck. So how it works is we pay the 3 mana to cast it, the 1 white. We can get a +1, which means whenever we play this, it has 4 counters on it, but we can use the plus or the minus or any of these once each of our turns. So let's say we do the +1, so we'll go to 5. We get to put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. And let's say next turn we do the -3, so we'd go down to 2. Target creature gains flying and double strike until end of turn. So flying, that creature can only be blocked by flying or reach, which we've talked about, but double strike makes it where, let's say we give that to our cat here, we give flying and double strike, so when we attack with it, it's going to deal 2 damage twice. So it'll go pop, pop, and that way we'll deal 4 damage instead. And we also have the -8, so let's say we had 8 counters on here. If we had 8 counters and we used the -8, our Planeswalker is going to go to the graveyard, and it says we're going to create X 2/2 white cat creature tokens where X is our life total. So we could end up with a lot of cats with that ultimate right there. So really cool Planeswalker right there. The next one is Path to Exile. For 1 white mana, we can exile a creature, and its controller gets a basic land to replace that creature we just exiled. And to exile something is really powerful, so let's talk about that. Let's say this is our deck, and this is our graveyard. If something is exiled, it's like going beyond what we can get back. So let's say we exiled a creature. Let's say we exiled Hornet Queen. This would go into exile. So how I show that it's exiled is I typically put it under my graveyard like this, and it's perpendicular to the graveyard, or you can also create a separate pile, but that's how I show that it's exiled. And they also get a basic land from their graveyard. Next up is Thunderfoot Baloth. I really like this one. It's 4 and 2 green for a 5/5 with trample. So trample is, let's say we attack this cat here. When we attack, it will have +2/+2 if we control our commander and other creatures get trample, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's say we attack with a 5/5 with trample, and our opponents will block because this is untapped any damage left over from their toughness. So for example, 2 - 5 is going to be 3, so that 3 damage is going to go hit that player. So if this didn't have trample, they could block it and then they'd have 1 less creature, but since it has trample, it's going to go over and hit that player, which can be really helpful, and green is known for trample. So if we did have our commander, this effect of giving our creatures +2/+2 and trample are going to be on all of our creatures, which is really, really powerful. This is a great card for green. Next up is Rootborn Defenses. It's an instant for 2 and a white. It says populate, and creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. And to populate, we create a token that's a copy of a creature token you already control. So we could create a token of maybe an Eldrazi, which is a 10/10, and it's really, really big. So that's just an example of a good thing to populate. And since it's an instant, we can play it on our turn or even an opponent's turn. Next up is a Holdout Settlement. We can play this and tap it for a colorless, or we can tap it and untap. We could tap an untapped creature we control, which we would want to work on tapping Imara as much as we can. And then we get a mana out of that. Next is Hornet's Nest. It's 0/2 Defender, which means we cannot attack with this card. We can only block with it. And whenever this is dealt damage, we make that many insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. So we are okay with this being dealt damage. Next up is Loyal Guardian. This is for 4 and a green. It's a 4/4 rhino with trample. And at the beginning of combat, so this is a trigger because it says at the beginning, if you control your commander, you get a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So let's play out that scenario. So we play some cards, and then we will tell our opponents, hey, we're gonna go to combat. And then we are going to, let's say we had our commander, Loyal Guardian, and this cat. It says at the beginning of combat, so even before we start attacking, we get to put counters on each of our creatures, which is really nice. And this deck doesn't mind those counters at all. Next up is Selesnya Evangel for a green and a white. This is a 1/2, and we can pay 1 mana and tap this, and tap an untapped creature you control, and then hint to Imara because we want to find ways to tap her, and then we get a Saproling creature. Next is Curse of Bounty, so whenever the enchanted player is attacked, so we can enchant a player, let's say we enchant, so we would pay 2 mana, enchant player 2, we would put it on their board, their playmat. Whenever player 2 is attacked, untap all non-land permanents you control, and each opponent attacking that player untaps all non-land permanents they control. So this can benefit other opponents, but it's also putting a target on the player's back that we have enchanted. So for example, we have this on player 2, and let's say we have these permanents. Permanents are things that stay on the battlefield. So they're lands, artifacts, creatures, enchantments. Things that are non-lands are anything that's not a land, but things that don't stay on the battlefield, they are instants and sorceries. They go to the graveyard once they are used. So let's say that we are attacking this opponent that is enchanted, and we already have these tapped. We get to untap things that are non-land, so we get to untap these. It's like they had vigilance, or if they've already been used, for example, the Arcane Signet and Selesnya Evangel, that gives us another chance to reuse those after our combat when we go to our second main phase. So Curse of Bounty can be really helpful. Next up is Camaraderie. So for 6 mana, this is 4, a green and a white. We gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures you control. And as you see, or as you saw, we had a lot of creatures on our battlefield. And then creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. So this is a great way to draw a lot of cards and gain a lot of life. Now we have Nullmaid Shepherd. This is tap 4 untapped creatures you control and destroy target artifact or enchantment. So let's talk about that. So the word TAP, or tap, is different from cards like Selesnya Evangel because it has the symbol tap. So let's talk about that. Whenever, let's say we just played Imara, we can't tap her initially because that would be to attack, and she has Summoning Sickness, right? Well, if we have Nullmaid Shepherd and we have 3 other creatures at least, we can tap 4 creatures, which this is a creature. We can tap 4, and then we can destroy target artifact or enchantment. They can be Summoning Sick, and we can still use cards like that, which is really, really cool. And this deck makes a lot of creatures, so it's easy for those cards to be abused. Next is Commander's Insignia. So for 4 mana, 2 and 2 white, creatures you control get +1/+1 for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. And this is an enchantment, so this could be off to the side. And let's say we cast our commander 3 times, our creatures get +1/+1 just for us casting our commander, which can happen. It's typical that we may have our commander targeted, or maybe someone blocked our commander. It's okay because this card gets us benefit for just playing our commander. So this 2/2 would be a 5/5, and that is really powerful. Next is Hour of Reckoning for 7 mana. So for 4 and 3 white mana, it has Convoke, which means we can tap our creatures to help pay for the cost of this spell. We can destroy all non-token creatures. So non-token means it doesn't have the word token on it. So that would destroy our commander and our other creatures. But if we had a lot of tokens, this would be a great card to be playing, especially if our other players that we're playing against don't have tokens. This is going to be a really good card for us. There's Dauntless Escort for 1 green and a white. That's the mana value. And then we have the Power and Toughness. It's a 3/3. We can sacrifice this card, so once it's played, we can sacrifice it and put it in the graveyard, and it will give our creatures we control indestructible until end of turn. So indestructible means we were to play a card that says destroy all creatures, or let's say our opponent plays this one, we could sacrifice one creature and it would protect our entire board or our entire battlefield from something like that. So that could be very powerful. Next is Overrun for 2 and 3 green, so 5 mana total. This is creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. This is a sorcery, so we have to play it on our turn. We have to play it during one of our main phases. We can't play it during combat. Has to be during our main phase, and I recommend you play it during the first main phase, which is the one before combat. Collective Unconscious. So for 6 mana, we draw a card for each creature we control. So if we have 12 creatures, we're going to draw 12 cards. If we have 3 creatures, we're going to draw 3 cards. So farther along in the game we are, the more benefit we're going to get out of this card. Let's talk about Sol Ring. So I mentioned it earlier. We can tap 1 mana, and now we can tap it that turn for 2 mana if we wanted to. So Sol Ring is a staple in this format, which is Commander, because it will come, I believe, in every Commander deck. I'm pretty sure it does. So next we have Vitu-Ghazi, the City Tree. This is a land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 green and a white, tap this, and then it creates a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. So if we need to create a creature token or if we need a blocker, this is one way to do that. Next is Mentor of the Meek. I think this is my favorite card when it comes to lower power decks, as in whenever another creature enters the battlefield, power 2 or less, under our control, we get to pay 1 mana. If we do, we get to draw a card. So let's say we get a 2/2 token cat from one of our cards. We can pay 1 mana and then we get to draw a card. Like, that is very powerful. So Mentor of the Meek, one of my favorites. Valor in Akros. This is 3 and a white for an enchantment that says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. So if we make a lot of tokens in one turn, our creatures are going to get really big really quick. White Sun Zenith. So we create X 2/2 white cat creature tokens, and it's going to cost us X white, and then after we cast it, we'll shuffle this back into our library, which is really unique because that means it's another chance to play this again, and we can also shuffle our library, which can be helpful sometimes. But I did want to mention X is whatever we pay into it. So let's say we had 3 white mana, we tapped, and then we tapped 4 in addition, so we paid 7 mana total. We would create 4 2/2 cats, and that would get shuffled back into our library. Let's talk about Spore Mound. This is 3 and 2 green for a 3/3 fungus. It has landfall, which means whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token, and we care a lot about making tokens. Next is Collective Blessing for 3 green and a white. Creatures you control get +3/+3, and it's an enchantment, and it just stays there. So this can make that cat a 5/5. Next is Harmonize for 2 and 2 green. It's a sorcery, so we play it during one of our main phases. We get to draw 3 cards. Next is Command Tower. So this enters the battlefield, and we can tap it immediately, and we can add 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so this can tap for a white or a green. Next is Dictate of Helion for 3 and 2 white. This has flash, and creatures you control get +2/+2. So what flash means is this is now an instant whenever we can play it. So it's still an enchantment, but we can play it on an opponent's turn, for example. We could play it anytime during our turn. We don't have to play it during the main phase. We're not just stuck to play it during that time. So we can be pretty creative whenever our creatures get +2/+2. For example, if we wanted to surprise our opponents, our creatures are bigger than they're supposed to be, we could trick them, and now they have less creatures than they thought, and next turn we're going to have bigger creatures and more creatures than they do. The last card in this deck I want to talk about is Karametra's Favor for 1 and a green. It enchants a creature, and when it enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card, and the enchanted creature has tap, add 1 mana of any color. So if we were to pay 1 and a green, it enters the battlefield, we draw a card, and then we could tap this creature to add 1 mana of any color. So this is really good for Emmara. Thank you so much for watching. If this video was helpful, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.